Welcome to Fountain of Hope. Here, we explore faith together and seek the true answers to life. Today, we continue our series, Bible Characters, the Untold Truth. Through these real stories of faith, you not only get to know the Bible more deeply, but also encounter the God who is still at work in our lives today. Sometimes, the deepest fear isn't losing what you have. It's standing on the edge of your life, terrified of starting over. Maybe you've faced a turning point, moving to a new city and starting fresh, leaving a familiar job to enter the unknown, or trying to rebuild trust after a broken relationship. You stand there, heart racing, mind full of questions. What if I fail? What if I choose the wrong path? Do I really have the courage to let go of everything and begin again? The hardest part isn't the challenge in front of you. It's feeling like you have nothing left to hold on to. No certainty, no safety net, no clear direction. You'd rather cling to what's familiar, even if it no longer fits, than step into a future you can't yet see. There's someone in the Bible who once stood at the same crossroad. He lived in a prosperous city. He had family, wealth, and a stable life. But one day, God spoke to him, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you." No map, no details, just a promise. He was 75 years old, his life already set, yet he chose to let go of everything and walk into an unknown wilderness. His name was Abraham. A man who responded to the call to start from zero by taking that first step of faith. And through that, he became the forefather of God's promised people. Today, we journey together into the book of Genesis to rediscover the story of Abraham. Abraham's story began in a place of peace, yet also of quiet ordinariness. At that time, he lived in Haran, a prosperous city with thriving trade routes and a stable life. He was 75, already an elder in his clan, sharing the years with his wife, Sarah, though their home was filled with wealth. It also held an unspoken sorrow, Sarah's barrenness, a silent shadow that lingered in their hearts. Perhaps Abraham thought his life would quietly fade beneath the lamps of Haran, growing old with familiarity, not surprise. But then, God's voice broke through the silence. One night, under a sky full of stars, God spoke to him, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great." No map, no details, just a promise, vague but full of hope. You will have descendants. You will be a blessing. Abraham stood frozen. At 75, leave everything? Abandon the people, the life, the comfort he knew, for a place he didn't even know the name of? He looked at Sarah. Her eyes held questions too. "God, can we really trust you?" But Abraham did not turn back. He gathered their belongings, took Sarah, his nephew Lot, and his servants, and left behind the lights of Haran, stepping into a journey with no end in sight. They arrived in Canaan, the land God had promised, but it wasn't what they expected. The wilderness was dry, the winds harsh, the nights long. Fires flickered outside their tents, casting weary faces in the dark. Then God appeared again. "I will give this land to your descendants." Abraham built an altar beneath the oaks and bowed in worship. But the questions still whispered inside. Descendants? But Sarah and I are old. How can this promise ever come true? And then, famine. Canaan grew barren. Food was scarce. Their flocks grew thin. Abraham had no choice but to go south, to Egypt in search of survival. But fear followed like a shadow. Sarah was beautiful, too beautiful, afraid the Egyptians might kill him to take her. Abraham said, "Please tell them you're my sister." Sarah nodded in silence, but her eyes held a quiet hurt. In Egypt, Pharaoh took notice of her and brought her into his palace. And Abraham waited, burdened by the weight of his own lie. But God intervened. Plagues fell on Pharaoh's house. Sarah was returned. Yet Abraham's heart grew heavier. God, where is your promise? Did I take the wrong path? They returned to Canaan. But new trials came quickly. Abraham and Lot had grown too wealthy. Their herdsmen fought over land and water. Abraham didn't want conflict. He said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between us. Choose whichever land you want. I'll take the other." Lushuz Gridili, the lush, green plains of the Jordan, a land that looked like the Garden of Eden. And Abraham was left alone, among the hills and dust of Canaan. He stood in the wilderness. The wind rustled his tent. Loneliness wrapped around him like the dark. God, I left Haran. I gave up comfort and even family. Was it really worth it? And then God spoke again. Lift up your eyes. Look to the north, the south, the east, the west. All the land you see, I will give to your descendants, as countless as the dust of the earth. Abraham looked up. The stars stretched out like a sea, and in the quiet, something flickered inside him. He built another altar at Bethel, and as the smoke rose to the sky, so did a small flame of faith, glowing in the darkness, quiet but alive. Night after night, Abraham looked up at the stars from his tent in Canaan. God had once promised, "Your descendants will be as countless as the dust of the earth." But reality felt like a heavy stone pressing on his chest. Sarah was old. Her womb had long ceased to hope. Their tent remained silent. No laughter of children, no sound of new life. It had been 10 years since Abraham left Haran at the age of 75. Now he was 85, and the promise felt more like a fading shadow. He cried out to God, "Sovereign Lord, where's the offspring you spoke of? I have no child. Will a servant inherit all that I have?" God brought him outside and pointed to the night sky. "Look up, count the stars if you can. So shall your descendants be." God made a covenant with Abraham, sealed with blood and fire, and declared, "This land will belong to your offspring." Abraham bowed in worship, but the wind carried away his unspoken doubts. "Lord, I believe, but how long must I wait?" He did not yet know. The journey of faith is rarely a straight path. It is shaped through trials. Sarah's waiting was even heavier. Her barrenness wasn't just a physical reality. It was a source of shame, a whisper behind her back. She began to question God's promise, and even her own worth. One day, she turned to Abraham and said softly, "Since the Lord has kept me from bearing children, go to my maidservant Hagar. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abraham agreed, but he didn't see the storm coming. When Hagar conceived, her eyes turned proud. She looked at Sarah as if to say, "I succeeded. You didn't." Sarah's quiet smile gave way to bitterness. She rebuked Hagar and eventually cast her out into the wilderness. Hagar ran, her tears soaking the desert ground. But God found her. "Go back to your mistress," he said. "You will have a son. Name him Ishmael, and he will become a great nation." Hagar returned and gave birth to Ishmael. Abraham was 86, finally a father. But joy did not fill the tent. Cracks began to appear, and as Abraham looked at Ishmael, he wondered, "Lord, is this the child you promised?" But God's plan was greater than Abraham's own arrangements. Time passed. At 99, God appeared once more. He changed Abram's name to Abraham, father of many nations, and Sarai became Sarah. Then God said, "By this time next year, Sarah will bear you a son. You shall name him Isaac. My covenant will be with him." Abraham fell to the ground, laughing, not from joy, but from disbelief. Will a man 100 years old have a child? Will Sarah, at 90, give birth. But God's word was like starlight, unshakable. And the next year, the impossible happened. From Sarah's tent came the cry of a newborn. Isaac, his name means laughter. He was living proof of God's promise. Abraham, now 100 years old, held Isaac in his arms. Tears traced the lines on his face. He finally understood. God's promises never fail, even when human strength fades. But joy was followed by conflict. Ishmael mocked Isaac. Sarah was furious. She said to Abraham, "Drive out that slave woman and her son." Abraham's heart broke. Ishmael was still his son. But God said, "Listen to Sarah, for it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Early in the morning, Abraham gave Hagar a skin of water and some bread, and sent her away. The wind in the desert carried the weight of his sorrow. Abraham's journey of faith was a long and painful one. He doubted. He stumbled. He even tried to force God's promise with his own hands. But every time, God brought him back with stars, covenants, and the cry of Isaac. Because faith is not about perfect clarity. It's about choosing to trust again and again, even in the dark. And Abraham's story was not yet finished. The greatest test was still waiting on the mountain of Moriah. Inside Abraham's tent, Isaac's laughter was the only light. He had waited 100 years for a son, and now the promise of God echoed in every joyful cry. But just as joy filled their days, God's voice came again, like thunder breaking the calm. "Abraham, take your son, your only son Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering." Abraham froze. Isaac, his beloved son, the promised heir God had given. Now God was asking for him back. He looked at Isaac sleeping peacefully. His heart ached. One question filled his mind. "God, will you take away everything?" He didn't argue. He didn't run. He simply rose in silence. At dawn, he chopped the wood, woke Isaac, and called 2 servants. Together, they set out toward Mount Moriah. 3 days of walking, every step like a weight on his soul. Isaac carried the wood on his back. Then came the question, "Father, where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham's voice trembled. "God will provide, my son." He looked ahead. The mountain peak was veiled in morning mist, as if even God's face was hidden. At the summit, Abraham built the altar. He laid the wood, and with shaking hands, he bound Isaac and laid him upon it. Isaac didn't struggle, but in his eyes, a quiet question lingered. Abraham raised the knife. Tears blurred his vision, and his heart cried out, "God, I trust you, but why this test?" At that very moment, a voice called from heaven, "Abraham, do not lay a hand on the boy." He stopped. He looked up, and there in the thicket, a ram was caught by its horns. Relief poured over him. Tears streamed down his face. He unbound Isaac and held him tight. Then he offered the ram in his place. God spoke again, "Because you did not withhold your only son, I will surely bless you. Your descendants will be as the stars of the sky and the sand on the seashore. Through them, all nations will be blessed." Abraham fell to the ground, his burden replaced by gratitude. He named the place Yahweh-Yireh. The Lord will provide. From the starry skies of Haran to the wilderness of Canaan, to the altar of Moriah, Abraham's faith had now reached its peak. He had doubted. He had stumbled. But every time, he chose to believe, even when the promise seemed to demand everything. Now, Isaac stood safely beside him, and God's oath, like the morning light, drove away all the fog. Abraham's life teaches us this. Faith isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to trust God's promise, even in the middle of it. Have you ever stood at the edge of your life, afraid to start over, afraid that God might ask you To let go of something precious? Maybe your dream, your sense of safety, even someone you love. But remember, God never only takes, He always provides. Like Abraham, when you lift the knife, willing to surrender it all, God's ram is already on the way. Your story is not over. Faith will lead you, even from the place of empty surrender, to the dawn of renewed hope. Abraham's life was a long journey, from the unknown to the promise. At 75, he said goodbye to the starry skies of Haran, leaving behind comfort and stepping into the wilderness of Canaan. He had moments of doubt, wondering why God's promise was delayed. He stumbled, trying to seize the future by human means. But under the stars, in Isaac's first cry, on the altar at Moriah, he chose again and again to believe. From Lord, where is your promise? To God will provide. Abraham's faith became a torch in the wilderness, shining through every dark night. He wasn't without fear. He wasn't without weakness. But through a lifetime of obedience, he proved one truth: God's promises never fail. Abraham's story is like a mirror reflecting our own struggles. Have you ever stood at a crossroads in life, afraid to start over? Maybe you've just moved to a new city, starting from scratch. Maybe you're facing a new career path, worried you have nothing to offer. Or maybe you're in a broken season, lacking even the courage to take one more step. But listen, the same words God spoke to Abraham, He also speaks to you. Go to the land I will show you. The Bible says, God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. Your fear, your limitations, they're not the end. They are the beginning of where God ignites hope. Just like Abraham, you don't need to have all the answers. You just need to take the first step of faith. If you're afraid, if you feel like you've lost everything, don't stop. Like Abraham, lift your eyes in the unknown and look up at God's starry sky. Every step you take is writing your own story of promise. Speech Balloon, we'd love to hear from you. Share your story in the comments. How did you find faith when life made you start from zero? Don't forget to like and subscribe to Fountain of Hope. Together, we'll explore more lives from the Bible, and in their journeys, we'll discover hope for our own. May you today, like Abraham, light the torch of faith in the wilderness of your new beginning and walk into the promise God has prepared for you.